Well, we wrap up the transition series today. So we've looked at the question what? 2 weeks ago, Amanda did a great job looking at the question why. Last week, we looked directly at who and those in Whoville. And today, we address how. In 2015, River Rain Productions released a film entitled David and Goliath with a header of I Will Do It. In 2016, a year later, Faith Warrior Productions released a film directed and written by different people entitled David and Goliath with the subtitle The Greatest Tale of All Time. So there have been many stories and books and movies about David and Goliath and or referencing Goliath, including a 1960 film with Orson Welles as King Saul and a 1985 film with Richard Gere as King David. Now, just watching Richard Gere's dance sequence in that movie is worth the rental alone. And all of this is pretty amazing coming from an event that was recorded and written down about 3,000 years ago. Although some contemporary men are credited with writing the screenplays, it was the prophet Samuel that recorded the event 3,000 years ago. We know that the Philistine army had drawn up battle lines on one hill, and the Israelites on another hill, with a valley between them. For 40 days, a Philistine giant, Goliath, stepped forward and challenged the Israelites to send forward a single man for a one-on-one battle. The loser and his nation would serve the other. Goliath was a huge and skilled fighter. All of the Jewish fighters were afraid of him. 3 of David's older, bigger, and stronger brothers, Eliab, Abinadab, and Shammah, were there. They didn't want to go. But young David steps forward and tells King Saul, I will. Saul first tells him, no, you're just a young kid. That giant has been a champion for years. But David insisted. And when David did step forward, Goliath teased him and made fun of him. Now we're only going to look at 4 verses of this story today, beginning with David convincing Saul here in the 37th verse. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. I cannot go in these, he said to Saul, because I'm not used to them. So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and, with his sling in his hand, approached the Philistine. The word of the Lord. You know, basketball great Wilt Chamberlain is quoted as saying, "Everybody pulls for David. Nobody roots for Goliath." And although that may be, a really popular theme around the world, I think for us here in the United States, it's our DNA. Those 13 pipsqueak little colonies had the audacity to revolt against one of the mightiest nations in the world. Yeah, it's in our DNA. And we see this theme over and over again in stories and books and movies. Like Underdogs and Remember the Titans. Great movies. And we've talked before about the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team and the miracle on ice, beating the Russian team at the height of the Cold War. We've also talked here before about one of the greatest David and Goliath movies ever, Rocky IV. At the height of the Cold War, Rocky Balboa travels to Moscow to fight Ivan Drago, a real giant. And of course, this movie plays on our patriotism. Of course it plays on our emotions. It connects with our DNA. When Rocky wins, we're all cheering. We all yell. We go crazy. Maybe we get teary-eyed. We want to run and find a flag to wave. But that's what happened when David defeated Goliath. The Israeli army went crazy. Started yelling. And then chasing after the rest of the Philistines. David was the biggest hero since Moses. If it had been a football game, instead of the Israeli army chasing after the Philistines, they would have torn down the goalpost. If it had been an Olympic hockey game, there would have been sticks and gloves flying everywhere and flags waving. How did this happen? Well, as we shared last week, Reverend Antonio Settles at annual conference said David had a small slingshot, but a big God. And David knew it. When David stepped out from his battle lines, he had a different perspective. Russell Johnston is quoted as saying, "Get the right perspective." When Goliath came against the Israelites, the soldiers all thought, "He is so big, we can never kill him." David looked at the same giant and thought, "He is so big, I can't miss." This is the perfect perspective for small churches. At annual conference, there was one workshop Larry and I got to attend together. And one of the keys to the workshop was identifying what lies churches tell themselves and start to believe. One of the lies that many small churches believe is that because they're small, they can't do such and such. And they start to believe it. And that's a lie. Just like David, small churches can do things big churches can't. Remember in our story today, David took off the armor that King Saul put on him. King Saul was treating him like a big warrior, like a big church. That wasn't David. David took all that stuff off, picked up his slingshot, picked up his bag, collected 5 smooth stones. That was David. And then he went out to meet the giant. Last weekend we mentioned one word that's often used to describe small churches is nimble. One of my assigned books for course of study last winter and spring is The Strategically Small Church. One sentence in the introduction reads, "A strategically small church is one that has become comfortable being small because it has learned to recognize the unique advantages of its size." When we're asked about Woods Chapel, we might answer in different ways. And we'll talk about 5 specific ways in just a minute. But if we're asked, what do Methodists believe? It might be nice to have answers at our fingertips. In fact, at last council meeting, it was mentioned that it would be nice to be able to go to something quickly and easily and pull that up. If someone asks, what do you believe? What do Methodists believe? To help with that, Larry is ordering some brochures that we can have available in the entryway over here, or in a rack, or people can take them home. Also, because we are such a mobile and online society now, to help people pull that up or show others wherever they may be, a What We Believe page has been added to our website in the drop-down under Home. To further assist with that, because so many people have smartphones today, this QR code is a code that will take people right to that webpage. So feel free to come up after worship, take a scan, take a photo of that, so it's in your phone. You can pull it up if somebody asks you the question, what do you believe? They can scan it, boom, they're right there on that page. And they have it in their phone. But let's get back to the book, The Strategically Small Church. I like the words on the cover here that can describe a strategically small church. Intimate. Yes. In this church, everybody knows everybody. And one of the very special times of our worship is the passing of the peace. Here, we take time for everybody to greet everybody. And that's special. I know of many churches who have so many people, they're so big, that they've discontinued having a complete passing of the peace. They may allow 20 or 30 seconds to greet your neighbors, and then they just move right on. So I invite you to think for a minute how special it is to be small and intimate. Yeah. Nimble. Nimble, we mentioned last week. We can react to things, react to changes, and react to sudden needs, and respond without going from one committee to another committee over a period of months. I have seen right here an urgent need come up, the necessary people get together, agree to a plan, and assistance was on the way that very day. Nimble, like David. I invite you to think for a minute how special being small and nimble is. Authentic. During the weeks I was waiting for my transfer and move from our Bank of Texas division up to our Bank of Kansas City division, I deliberately visited a different church every Sunday. I wanted to see how they were doing church. Some were trying to copy others. And I observed everything and then made notes after leaving. I observed the appearance approaching the door. Were the doors open for guests? Did anyone look for new faces and offer assistance? What was the lighting, the music, and the participation of the congregation like? Were people engaged in worship? I saw some churches that were as fake and phony as could be because they were trying to be something they weren't. I saw everything from people ignoring new faces that walked in to wild concert-style lighting and a smoke machine. Like David, who took off that armor and did his thing. We are authentic. I invite you to think for a moment how comfortable it feels to be authentic, effective. Woods Chapel has done a wonderful job over the many years at being effective. For one, just to be here in 2018 after 134 years is rather something. And also, not every church in the Missouri Conference meets their full apportionments, which are used to provide ministry across Missouri and around the world and in ways and means that we couldn't do on our own. But Woods Chapel does so much more than just paying apportionments for ministry. Remember that announcement in our opening with the number of washcloths donated to Festival of Sharing? Okay? Now, if we were to take that number of washcloths and divide it up like all the churches are divided up to calculate apportionments, that is, the larger churches with the larger expenses pay a larger percentage share, and the smaller churches with smaller expenses pay a smaller percentage share. If we were to put that same percent calculation against the washcloths, we find that this church donated more based on size. And when I say more, I don't mean a little more. I don't mean double more, which would be 200%. Woods Chapel donated 2,000% more than other larger churches based on size. That's the little church with a big heart. So, the ways we could respond if we were asked about Woods Chapel, we might respond intimate, nimble, authentic, effective, and the little church with a big heart. You know, we've been talking the last few months about some possible new ways to be effective in ministry right here in our local mission field. There's never a guarantee that a new effort will bring the desired results. But as mentioned last week, a wise old pastor said, for a church to try a ministry that doesn't work is not a failure. The only failure is failing to try. Ice hockey great Wayne Gretzky put it this way. He's quoted as saying, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." We are fighting a spiritual battle. The enemy is a giant and skilled. We need to be ready to walk on to that battlefield. Let's just remember that we may have a small slingshot, but we have a big God. Let's pray. Mighty God, you have placed us and Woods Chapel here, right here, to do what others can't. We are purposefully chosen with our unique talents and gifts you have given us. Give us the faith and courage to say, like David, I will, we will, and all God's people said, Amen. Hymn number 407.